Hey Deca fam, Liam here. This is a random special episode podcasty thing for me to just spew out some thoughts on the ROG Ally, this channel, what I'm going to do, and so on. To keep you mildly entertained if you're just sat watching, I'm going to throw up gameplay of Brotato. Otherwise, you can just minimize and listen in the background. So then, the ROG Ally has now been announced in full and the price is very competitive to the Steam Deck. At $599 US for the low-end version and $699 for the Z1 Extreme that launches on June 13th. It does seem the price in the EU is a fair bit higher though, at €799 for the Z1 Extreme model, so the EU seem to have quite a big markup there. I have no plans to buy one though, and no contact with ASUS for a review unit either. The thing is, even if I did have a contact with ASUS, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for me personally until it supported Linux, either through a proper SteamOS release from Valve or just another Linux distribution. This is a Linux channel, the name should be obvious enough, and Linux is my day job, and I really don't like using Windows for anything at all. So if you're after a continuing Steam Deck and Linux focused creator, stick with me and hit subscribe. Another pretty important point though is that I simply don't have money to burn every time a new device comes along. To be pretty blunt about it, right now I basically have no money and this channel doesn't make much at all. I simply can't afford to buy one or, well, anything extra. So unless someone randomly came along and donated the entire cost, it's just a realistic no right now. This is not a call for help on that though, just me being brutally honest. I'm no doubt not alone in that either with other Steam Deck owners. For so many people, the Steam Deck likely ate away a lot of spare cash anyway. And when you think about it, there's already multiple millions of people who own the Steam Deck and will want to keep up with it. I'm not just going to suddenly abandon you all and water down my content with lots of other things. While I am obviously biased towards Linux devices, it's a matter of practicality for me as well. Doing all of this alone, with no editor, no one else doing anything for me on this, I prefer to focus my time on what I already have and what people already come to me for. However, competition is good. Competition is great, in fact. It pushes companies to do better for us as consumers. And no doubt Valve will keep an eye on how it goes for a potential Steam Deck too. From what I've seen and what I've read up on the Ally since the reveal, because plenty of people had a review unit, there's bits about it that I simply don't like as well. There's no touchpads for starters, and that for me is actually quite a deal breaker. I use them a fair bit in all sorts of games for various reasons. They're so ridiculously useful. Then there's the quick suspend and resume on the Steam Deck. I use that constantly. I don't think I could survive without it. As a parent and as someone who's quite busy quite often, I like the fact that I can just easily pick it up and play it on the deck with the awesome suspend feature. And with the Ally relying on ASUS Armoury Crate for a lot of things that it does, which is their launcher that sits on top of Windows, I've already read a few reviews noting how it is quite a nuisance. There's the community that's built up around the Steam Deck as well, and it's just fantastic. I love seeing all the weird and crazy crap people are doing with it every day. People are coming along and just creating some really cool stuff, from EmuDeck to cryo utilities. And there's tons of cool accessories you can get, and I could just go on and on about the community around the Steam Deck. You're all awesome. Another point I would like to make is about Proton, Valve's translation layer based on Wine that runs Windows games and translates them into what Linux understands for the Steam Deck. While it has downsides, and we need to be clear, there are downsides like some games not working yet, or developers who just refuse to enable their anti-cheat, there are some pretty big upsides to it as well. Valve can constantly, and already do, put in specific tweaks for games to get them to work better, and over time, that compatibility list just keeps on rising. Their own verification system recently hit over 9,000 titles, and that's no small feat. You can find that some games, like older titles, even run better with Proton on Linux than on, say, Windows 11, where it will just plainly run the old game. Proton is basically a superpower, giving Valve and anyone who wants to tinker with the open source code the ability to get in fixes for games to make them work better, regardless of whether they're a day old, 10 years old, 20 years old, and so on. Just reading the Ally review on The Verge, they even make that point quite well, how some games they tried wouldn't work or crashed on the Ally, but did work out of the box on Linux with the Steam Deck. One thing I will be doing is keeping an eye on the Steam overall top seller list. I'm very curious to see if it does eat into the sales of the Steam Deck. I would say from the beginning of July onwards is when we might see if things change. Because right now, the Steam Deck has still been in the top 5 pretty much every week since release. And I'll make a point there, that is even with multiple other companies launching other handhelds that on paper do have higher specifications than the Steam Deck, and none of them have been able to eat into the market there. You never know. Valve might even reduce the price of the Steam Deck. Let's say potentially they could drop the 64 and 256GB models just to focus on the 512, which they previously said was the more popular model. This way they could potentially reduce their own costs on it by focusing their manufacturing effort on one single SKU. It would make sense in some ways as well. But removing the 64GB model might also work against them because it's such a cheap entry model into handheld PC gaming, which might even be quite a strength that it has, especially if they manage to reduce the price on the 64GB model. Who knows what could happen? We're also still waiting to hear from Valve on the SteamOS 3 release for everyone. So Valve just love their Valve time. They don't really like to talk about things until they're really ready. But once SteamOS 3 comes out as a download that then anyone can use anywhere, we might see some really interesting movement in the handheld space again with that. So that's just a lot of really random thoughts on how I feel about it and this channel right now. But what are your thoughts? As always, I love to hear from you, and I do have plenty more videos planned. But for now, I'll see you later.